Welcome the timeless forgotten mystery. In Operation Midnight Hammer, 125 U.S. military aircraft carried out coordinated attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. On the night of June 21, 2025, around 2 a.m., 7 B-2 Spirit bombers entered Iranian airspace from the Mediterranean Sea, passing over Israel and Iraq, and launched strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. After these attacks, the world's attention immediately turned to Iran's possible retaliation. With more than 24 U.S. bases scattered across the Middle East, there was fear that Iran could strike any one of them. And just 2 days later, that's exactly what happened. Iran targeted the US al-Udeid airbase in Qatar and the Ain al-Asad airbase in Iraq. But these weren't the first attacks on American bases. Iran had struck US assets several times before, and at one point, even disabled an entire American warship. Let's look back at 4 key moments in history when Iran openly delivered heavy blows to the United States. Welcome back to ZMTV. On January 3, 2020, at Baghdad Airport, the US carried out a drone strike that killed Qassem Soleimani. He wasn't just an Iranian general, he was the most trusted man of Supreme Leader Khamenei and one of the most powerful figures shaping the Middle East. His death sent shockwaves across Iran, and the nation vowed revenge. While many thought Iran would limit itself to threats and rhetoric, this time Iran decided to respond with direct missile strikes. Iran openly warned America, declaring, "You killed our commander, now you will pay the price." The Ain al-Asad airbase in western Iraq was one of America's most important bases in the region. Just 6 days after Soleimani's death, on January 8, 2020, at 1:20 a.m., dozens of Fateh and Sham ballistic missiles streaked across the sky and rained down on the US base. The attack was so precise that the missiles destroyed fuel depots, aircraft shelters, and command posts with pinpoint accuracy. Not a single missile missed its target. The US had advanced intelligence and soldiers had taken shelter in bunkers, but the damage was devastating. Hangars, runways, and barracks were reduced to rubble. Initially, the US claimed there were no casualties, but later it was revealed that over 100 American soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries. Some lost consciousness, others were blinded temporarily, and many suffered long-lasting neurological damage. The world was stunned when Iran boldly claimed responsibility, calling the strike a warning and promising a much larger response if provoked again. The US tried to downplay the attack. President Donald Trump, then in his first term, dismissed the situation with his famous words, "All is well." But satellite images, soldiers' videos, and before and after visuals exposed the real destruction. Iran even stated that it could have targeted the barracks where US soldiers were sleeping, but its intention wasn't to kill, it was to send a powerful message. The global community was shocked that Iran had launched direct missile strikes on a US base, and America had chosen silence in return. But this wasn't the first time Iran had forced the US to back down. Just a year earlier, in June 2019, tensions between the two nations had escalated once again. On a calm night that summer, a US Navy RQ-4 Global Hawk drone, worth millions of dollars, entered Iranian airspace. Within just 20 seconds, Iran turned this prized drone into a ball of fire. At that time, the Trump administration had imposed harsh sanctions on Iran, banning other countries from buying Iranian oil. Iran's exports had dropped to nearly zero, and in retaliation, Iran-backed forces had begun targeting oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. The US deployed the RQ-4 Global Hawk drone for surveillance of Iranian movements. Flying at 60,000 feet, beyond the reach of most air defense systems, the drone crossed into Iran's coastal boundaries. But Iran's Sevim-Khordad missile defense system locked on and fired. The missile struck the drone at its center, and the sky above the Persian Gulf lit up with fire. Iran claimed the drone had intruded 15 kilometers into its territory, while the US insisted it was still in international airspace. Trump initially threatened airstrikes on Iran but ultimately pulled back, avoiding a direct war. Now let's go back further, to 1987, during the Iran-Iraq War. Tensions were already high in the Persian Gulf as Iran targeted Kuwaiti oil tankers, sparking fears of a global oil crisis. To counter this, the US launched Operation Earnest Will, in which US Navy warships escorted Kuwaiti oil tankers safely through the Gulf to the Arabian Sea. This became the largest US naval convoy operation since World War II. To deter Iran, the US even reflagged Kuwaiti ships, replacing their national flag with the American one, and declared that any attack on these ships would be treated as an attack on America itself. Iran initially held back but eventually lost patience. On October 16, 1987, a Kuwaiti tanker renamed and reflagged as an American ship, MV Al-City, was struck by a Chinese-made Silkworm missile launched by Iran. The missile hit the ship's bridge directly. This was the first Iranian attack on a ship carrying the American flag. 18 crew members were injured, and the captain, a U.S. citizen, lost both his eyes due to severe facial injuries. By striking an American flag ship, Iran openly challenged the U.S. Navy's dominance. In retaliation, 3 days later, the U.S. destroyed 2 Iranian oil platforms in the Persian Gulf, which were being used by Iran's Revolutionary Guard for military purposes. But Iran had more surprises in store. During the same operation, it planted naval mines in the Gulf to target oil tankers and warships. These mines weren't visible on the surface. They were anchored underwater about 5 meters deep, perfectly positioned to explode beneath large vessels. On April 14, 1988, the U.S. Navy's guided missile frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts struck one of these Iranian mines during the convoy mission. The explosion ripped a 21-inch hole in the ship's hull, flooded the engine room, and disabled 2 turbines. A mine worth just $1,500 had nearly sunk a $96 million warship. When U.S. forces investigated, they discovered a full minefield laid by Iran. 4 days later, the U.S. retaliated with a large-scale assault, destroying Iranian oil platforms and sinking the Iranian warship Isahand. In this clash, a U.S. Marine helicopter was also shot down, killing 2 pilots. History has proven that since the fall of the pro-American government in Iran, no amount of sanctions or pressure has been able to silence the country. Despite being confronted by the world's greatest superpower, Iran has consistently shown it will strike back when threatened. What are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments.